Yes, hi, here I am. Um, I want to make this as short as I can. I know I always say that, and it often doesn't end up being so short, but I will try. We want to finish chapter 21 during this coming week, the week of February 1st to 7, Monday to Sunday. Although I hope that you don't need to do homework on a Sunday, but you can finish it by Saturday morning. A lot of you have sermons to prepare and ministry in between. I understand that, but this is a challenging time learning New Testament Greek. It is a challenging time for your families because it takes extra time away from them. But these times will come to a close after perhaps this year or perhaps after the infill. But if God has called you to do these studies, diligence in your study will be very rewarding. Of course, I know you have to keep up your family relationships. Don't let those fall away. You have ministry and a job perhaps on the side. In all of these things, it's always impossible. The Christian life is never easy. It is also never difficult. The Christian life is impossible. That's why we believe in miracles. That's why if God has called you to this task, and I believe that he has called the ones in this classroom, as I've observed you so far, I sense a calling of God upon your life, that you are not doing this just to get something by your name. By now you would have figured out that a little paper certificate for biblical studies, 6 semesters, is not worth it just for a piece of paper to put on the wall. But you're doing this because you want to study God's word much more diligently. And this forces you to do that. It also gives you many more tools in that process. And God's word is given to us in human language. It is God's word, but it is in human language. And it is especially that aspect of human language that we are emphasizing. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have application continually to our Christian life and to our Christian ministry. But we will be talking more about that in the next semester in Greek 372 and in 442. Keep in mind that next semester will be one of the most difficult time-wise for you because even though we will only be meeting as we would for one class, we're actually doing 2 classes next semester, Greek 4 and 5. We're doing grammar. We're finishing the book, the textbook that you have, Dr. McIver. We are introducing parts of the intermediate textbook that all of you will be using at the infill level for those who go on, but many of you need to begin using even if you don't go on, because I encourage you to use this intermediate level, to go on from just the forms to the use of the forms. Now, right now, especially because of the COVID situation, we are concentrating pretty much only on forms. When we can get back into at least some classrooms, which should happen next semester beginning in March, I will give you more information about that later. When we get back to that situation, we will be able to talk more about the application of forms. Right now, I want to just give you the information, show you the information that you need for the coming week as we complete chapter 21. And next week, we will complete chapter 22, the imperfect tense. That may sound like a lot, but if we only look at the forms, then there is not that much to learn. And we will have chapter 23 as a review chapter, the finished part 3 of the textbook. We will be coming back and reviewing participles, especially on the final exam. Participles will be our main emphasis, but I also want you to learn the forms of the perfect tense that are given for us in chapter 22, chapter 21, and the forms for the imperfect tense that are given for us in chapter 22. It does mean some more memory, committing words to memory, but you are all young people and this should be no problem. So let's look first of all at my whiteboard. I'm going to switch to that view. And you see what I'm calling verb stems. Now, this is a little bit different from Dr. McIver's way of doing it. The way that I like to do it is to put our verb stems in three different categories. The first one is the one that we use for lu. We're using the verb luo here as an example, the regular verb to I lose, luo. The present stem that we use is lu. Luo, lues, lue, you remember from Greek 1, the first semester. And then you remember at the end of the first semester, we introduced the middle and passive forms, omai, etai, ometha, estha, ontai. Then you'll remember that in chapter 15 and 16, we introduced the infinitive, which just takes this stem and adds ain, luain, the present infinitive, to loose. By the way, many of you are making the mistake of putting a subject with the infinitive, luain, and the aorist infinitive, lusai. Lusai is the aorist infinitive. Infinitives don't have a person, first person, second person, I, you, he, she, it. Infinitives are by definition, they don't have a subject because they're infinitives. That's where they get their name. Any subject, any number of subjects that could be involved. Now, what is helpful for me is to remember that the aorist tense, in forming the aorist tense, this sigma is crucial for most verbs. Some are irregular, especially the second aorist or the strong aorist on page 114 in your textbook. I hope you have really committed those strong aorist or second aorist forms to memory because they occur so often in the Greek New Testament. Apon, apon, the second aorist of Lego. And there's ephagon, the second aorist of estheo. Estheo, I am eating. Ephagon, I ate. So, the regular aorist or the weak aorist form has this sigma as its key consonant, loose. So I like to think of the aorist stem as loose. And then I add the endings for the aorist tense. And for example, I add the augment. If I in aorist indicative, this isn't true of the aorist subjunctive or the aorist infinitive, and so on, but only of the aorist indicative, which is the mood that we had up through chapter 15. We only knew that indicative mood. That is the mood of statements and questions, the usual mood of stating facts. But there are other moods, as we discovered, infinitive and subjunctive. But the past tense is formed by adding the augment, and then the key consonant sigma, elusa, elusas, elusin. And so the aorist tense was not difficult, and I know that you know it now. Now, the point is the perfect. The perfect stem, if you think of the perfect stem generally as reduplication, not the augment, but reduplication. This does not put it necessarily in past time, as we will discover, but there are, the perfect tense has a more subtle meaning, actually. But the basic stem is the reduplication and kappa instead of sigma. So instead of loose, we have Luke. Add the reduplication, we have le Luke, and then we have the perfect tense endings, which are almost the same as the aorist endings in the active voice, as, en, except for o, omicron, o, asin in the third person plural. If you look in your textbook, I know if you've done your homework, for the first part, chapter 21, section 1, you know now this stem, and you know the endings for the perfect active indicative. Le Luca. And then what happens when you reduplicate with other verbs? Now, it's very helpful for me to think in terms of these verb stems. The indicative and subjunctive and infinitive lu. The aorist loose. And the sigma is a crucial consonant that's added in the aorist tense. The crucial consonant that is added in the perfect tense is kappa. And usually some form of reduplication. Le, Luke, a, for example. Now I'm going to take you back to our presentation, and we're going to look at just a couple of slides. And your main job will be to read carefully chapter 21 in the textbook. And this week, I'm going to ask you to finish learning sections 2 to 7, to finish learning all of chapter 21. Memorizing the perfect forms. The perfect active are the most important, but the perfect middle and passive, and especially the perfect participle, you should be able to recognize. I will probably not ask you to write down what is the perfect participle active of luo, for example. Lelukos, lelukonta, and so on. But you should be able to recognize it as being a perfect participle. And by the way, another point I need to emphasize, many folks are looking at verb forms that are participles and either saying, oh, that's an indicative, or they're looking at an indicative form and saying, oh, it's a participle. Make sure that you know your forms. It's important to learn vocabulary and to learn your forms right now. We will be coming back and reading the Greek New Testament and seeing the treasures in there, but unless we learn our forms and our vocabulary, we won't be able to do that. So you need to concentrate on these forms. Let me share that screen with you. And let me start that. Here we are, the perfectest form with reduplication. We saw that last time. I'm going to move this over here. So I've already mentioned le, lu, plus the ending, the reduplication, le, and the kappa, the sign of the perfect ending, plus a. Le luka, le lukas, le luken, le lukamin, le lukate, le lukasin. Some forms vary from this, but these are our basic perfect endings. Now, the perfect participle masculine that you will meet also in chapter 21 looks like the indicative. I have loosed, but loosing, or to have loosed. Usually we will translate the participle have loosed. The ship which has been loosed, for example, is a participle describing an adjective describing the ship. The ship which has been loosed from the shore can now sail. And if the ship were masculine, which, by the way, it's not, it's neuter in Greek, but if it were, it would take a masculine participle. And as you know, participles decline like nouns. So we have leluk os, leluk ota in the accusative, leluk otos, looking like onomatos in the genitive, leluk oti, leluk otes in the nominative plural. This sa osi es as onsin of the third declension nouns is very visible with the perfect with all the participles in the masculine and in the neuter. Now, if we also need to look at be able to recognize the perfect, middle, and passive forms, because for example, in the participle, because there are some deponent verbs. We haven't had the passive, but there are just some deponent verbs, and there are some verbs that use the middle voice. And the perfect participle will look like this. Pe paru menos. This is paru omai. Notice we can't use luo for this one because luo isn't a deponent verb. So instead of using luo, we use paru omai. Pe paru menos. The one who has gone, for example. Ha peparu menos, the one who has gone away, or the one who has gone, the one who has departed. Peparu menos. You would have to have the article ha peparu menos in order to mean the man or the one who has gone away or who has gone. Ha anthropos peparu menos. The os agrees with anthropos, with the nominative ending. So the participle translated, not so much ing, that's more of a present tense, sometimes aorist, but has. It can be present tense, it depends on the verb. But this one would be usually something that's happened in the past, perfect tense. Well, you can look at these forms in the textbook. There, he gives them for you for the perfect, participle, middle, and passive. There are some verbs that take these middle and passive endings. That's why we need to memorize them now. Now, we have the perfect participle masculine, and we have the feminine, and it is a little bit different, but you notice again, as in the aorist tense participle, it follows the first declension nouns in the feminine. The masculine and the middle and passive feminine, you notice, also follows the first declension noun endings, but not of the alpha pure as here, but of the ato noun. So peporumene, peporumenin, peporumenes, and so on. The dative with the iota subscript, and then the neuter plural, peporumenai. And then it becomes the same as the active feminine. So the neuter forms instead of os is os. And otherwise, the neuter behaves as we expect a neuter to behave, as long as we expect the luk, the kappa, as the key consonant, that ends the stem of the perfect, and as long as we add the reduplication. And again, the middle and passive neuter endings are very similar to the masculine, except on, and ah. And these we are used to already from chapter 4, where we were introduced to neuter nouns. And we see, again, these kinds of endings, even in the middle and passive neuter participle. Now, it's a good thing to review the subjunctive. There is no perfect subjunctive, at least not enough of them that we need to worry about the subjunctive, really. I'm just reviewing the subjunctive from chapter 16 here so we don't forget it. Dechomai, and you remember from chapter 16, I welcome, I might welcome, or something similar, or in order that I might welcome, hinna, dechomai. And in that case, these endings, which are omai, etai, omatha, esta, ontai, lengthen to omai, etai, omatha, esta, ontai. You remember this from chapter 16. I'm only reviewing from chapter 16 here. In the aorist tense, we take the chi and add sigma, becomes xi, dexomai. Then we had some verbs that in the aorist tense have a passive stem. We still have o, ace, a, omen, eta, osin. When we get to chapter 24, we will notice that the consonant that is key for the aorist passive is theta. And some verbs like apokrinomai, we first met in chapter 9 of the textbook. Apokrinomai, I answer, become in the aorist tense subjunctive, apokritho, apokrithes. This is wrong. This is aorist tense, not present tense. So cross this out, please. Not present, aorist. The aorist subjunctive of I answer, I might answer, apokritho. You might answer, apokrithes. If you've forgotten your subjunctive tense endings, go back, please, to chapter 16 and review those as well. We won't look at these, are not particularly important. What is important, one thing that's still more is important to me in introducing the perfect tense is verb aspect. The present tense tends to be continuous action in Greek. So that's the reason I represent it by a long arrow. That it is okay, as in the textbook, to use the simple present. I go, I come, I loose, I see. But I really like for you to use the continuous present, because that is usually the force of the Greek present tense. I am going, I am loosing, I am seeing. It's some action that is happening in front of our eyes. It is some action in which I am involved. It is happening. The aorist tense is the opposite of that. It is either a point action or it is a summary action. I went, I saw, I came. It's looking at the action as a whole. It's looking at the action that takes place from outside rather than from inside. Here, we call this verbal aspect. The verbal aspect in Greek of the present tense is it's happening. I am part of the story, or I am looking at the story happen, either one. Aorist tense, the story is being summarized for me, or we are emphasizing only one time action, but it doesn't, some teachers sometimes say the aorist tense is point action. Not always. Very often it is a summary of what happened. And because it is a summary, it is then usually in the past tense, because that is the tense that we use to summarize something. I went to town. That summarizes what I did today. I went to town. Aorist tense. Now, what happens with the perfect tense is that we have a point action of something happening with the results that continue. The perfect tense in that way is a kind of combination of aspect of the present and the aorist together. I have come. You notice when I say I have come, we translate the Greek perfect with the English present perfect tense, I have come. Something has happened, but I have come means I am still here. I have come. And this verbal aspect in the Greek New Testament is important for the perfect. In fact, some perfects will be translated as present tense because of this continued results. I came and I am still here, so I have come. And there will be some verbs that that are perfect in form, but we will translate as present. But if we understand verbal aspect, we understand why. It's because this present tense is also bound up in the perfect tense. I have come and I am now here at the present time. I have eaten and my food is still in my stomach. I am full. I have eaten. The results are still there. The perfect tense tends to emphasize the results of an action. And therefore, it has a lot in common with the present tense. But it also has this aspect of something that happened in the past. So it has a little bit of the aorist tense verbal aspect as well. It is kind of a combination. Now, any Greek grammarian who is listening to me will be saying, you are oversimplified this, and that's true. But for right now, I think this is the most helpful way to understand. Now, remember, you need to learn your vocabulary. And let's stop sharing. I'm going to post homework. It'll be mainly translating and parsing perfect forms, indicative, participles, participle and indicative forms in the perfect tense, a few sentences to translate that use perfect so you can get used to what it means. But let's look just briefly at the textbook, and it's here. Because in section 21, we have not only the regular perfects that we expect, tereo. I have kept, tereka. I keep, I have kept. Genao, the reduplication, geneka. This is a regular perfect. You see the kappa and the end of the stem, and then the endings, a, as, in, and so on. And you see also the reduplication, ge, and le, and pe, and se, in each case in the perfect stem of the regular perfect. Now, when you go to chapter 21.2.2, you have a list of irregular perfects. And the reason that we need to learn these is because they are very common. I throw, balo. I threw, aorist tense, ebalon. I have thrown, bebleka. It's irregular, but still has the reduplication, and therefore it's easy to recognize. Bebleka, I have thrown. Now, ginosko is a little bit more irregular. It almost looks like an aorist, but what gives it away as a perfect is this kappa. Egnoka, I have known. And some of the others, erchomai, this in the perfect tense looks completely different. Elelutha, erchomai, and then you have the aorist is a strong aorist form, and then you have the perfect. It looks like an augment, but if we know that this is the perfect form elelutha, I have come, then we won't get mixed up. Histemi, again, the kappa is the thing here, is the consonant that shows us, we are dealing not with an aorist, but with a perfect. Now notice the translation, not I have stood, but I stand. It translates as a present tense. And there are several perfect forms that translate as the perfect. One of the most common we'll see in the, here you have the participle forms that I've already introduced in the presentation. So you just need to read through these carefully and notice how each is translated. You do not need to pay attention to the perfect infinitive because it is not found enough in the New Testament. We will recognize it when we see it, but we won't worry about it right now. But you do need to read the examples of translating the perfect tense, and you need to learn the vocabulary of the most frequently occurring irregular perfects and the other irregular perfects. You need to learn these because we meet them often in the Greek New Testament. Now I'm going to give you homework. Now I can give you not only the perfect active, but all the perfect participle forms and so on. So I'm going to give you post homework for you from exercise 21, and also a few sentences here from this part. Translate the following into idiomatic English. Parsing, we'll do a little bit of that. And you need to recognize the perfect forms. Not all of them are perfect, but most of them are. And we will work on John 8, not this coming week, but in the week after that. So we will save John chapter 8 for, this is our week coming up, I think is week number 11, if I'm not mistaken. It may be 10 or 11. Suddenly I've forgotten. We will not start John chapter 8 translation until the very last week when we are reviewing, and we'll do a few verses from John 8, but we will come back to the Gospel of John much more heavily in Greek 4, and hopefully be meeting on campus some in Greek 4. I will explain how that's going to happen later. So I hope now you understand the perfect tense. I may be posting also some video segments from Dr. Campbell on the perfect tense. Just don't forget that when he introduces the pronunciation, he gives the traditional, which we use only, but he also gives the modern Greek pronunciation. You do not need to know or use the modern Greek pronunciation. If you want to learn it, that's fine, that's up to you. I will not be using it in class, and you will not be using it at the MPhil level either. All of your teachers are used to using the common Greek pronunciation. So I hope this helps you. You need to read carefully in chapter 21, now all the way through, and you need to learn the vocabulary in chapter 21. The regular perfect forms and the irregular forms, but don't be dismayed. Notice the reduplication and especially the kappa, which is very common for the perfect verb tense.